All right, welcome to a very special episode of the Sharpest College Football Podcast. We are calling this Island Time. First, before we explain the name of this episode, I just have to tell everybody Robert is already couching his poor performance today under the guise of being sick. Robert is actually sick. We were chatting before, and he sounds very horrible. So just brace yourselves for the first time that he chimes in. I'll keep it a surprise for now. But Island Time. So if you were like me before before the media world just killed Hawaii football, you would go through a full day of football and you just wanted more. And there would, if you're lucky, there would be a Hawaii game at 9 Pacific, and you would be greeted by this gentleman right here. We all, if you were among us, Robert Kekalua, who would bid us aloha in his nice, kind, gentle voice from Hawaii. And we would get our last little fix of college football for the weekend. And that's what this is. A few more games that we wanted to dig into a little bit more, joined by Step on a Duck, our guy, and the very sick Robert Martin. You know what?
Doing
We'll
well. We're
start with
already
Duck
in
and we'll
week
just leave
6.
Robert's
Don't
voice
blink
a
because it
surprise.
just
Duck,
flies
you
too
doing well
quick.
so
We
far?
wait 8 months for this, and it's already almost half over. And so it's been a real good season for me. And you guys had a real killer week last week, and so really excited to put our minds together and have a great discussion about the college leagues coming up in a couple days.
Absolutely. Robert, let's just get the weirdness out of the way. Just say hello to everybody and scare them audioly.
No, it's not. It's the news of my death have been greatly exaggerated, but that's okay. No, yeah, we rally, and again, as Step Duck said, we wait all year for this, and we're already halfway through. Yeah, we got to make the most of it. We got to rally, and yeah, we move on.
We appreciate you playing hurt, Robert. All right. With that, what we've done here is Duck is, if I can make this, there we go. Duck has picked 4 games here that he wants to go over in more detail. We just asked him to pick ones that he wasn't going to agree with us that we went over already this week. So I changed the order a little bit in descending order of probably national interest. So first one here is an interesting spot. You've got Alabama coming off a big win, going to Vanderbilt. Could be tricky. First, Duck, why don't you tell us what you like on
So
this
you
and
got
lay
a
out
couple
your
things here,
case,
right?
and Robert and I will just
Vanderbilt
kind of
is
dig in
much
after that.
improved. The transfers that they've got, specifically Diego Pavia at quarterback, has really changed the dynamic of this team. Vanderbilt is no longer the sleepwalk pushover team that they have been in the past. And so I think that when you're handicapping these games, you cannot just assume that Vandy is just going to be a pushover. There was no better example of that than when they went to the number 7 ranked Missouri and took them to the wire, lost by 3, and they had a chance to win the game, missed a field goal. And so there's a couple of different things that I have at play here. First of all, it's a massive spot, and part of my handicapping is always assessing schedule, situational, and motivational spots. And so you had Alabama off a bye. They had a massive emotional game at home hosting Georgia. And the way the game played out, obviously, they got out to a huge 28-0 lead. They were on cruise control. And then, bam, Georgia came back and actually took the lead themselves before Ryan Williams made an insane play to give Alabama the lead for good. Now what you have is you've got this emotional game that just took place. And now how is Alabama going to practice all week, and what's their motivation for really destroying and taking it to Vanderbilt when they have tough South Carolina team on deck? So you've got a sleepy spot for Alabama. You've got Vanderbilt, who's an improved team and a much more competitive team in the SEC off of a bye, and they're at home. This is just a classic spot where Alabama is likely to certainly win the game, but to cover 3.5 touchdowns, I'm not sold on that. I just really like the spot for Vanderbilt. They're a much different team. They're much more competent and competitive. We've already seen that with the win against Virginia Tech and the very close loss against Missouri. And this was one of the first plays I made on the openers. I took 25.5. I would still play it at this number. I really like Vanderbilt to keep this game much more competitive into the second half than people will think. So that's where I'm at on Vandy.
Gotcha. So I will pull up. There we go. So here's the metrics that I've got on this one. One of the first things that stands out to me is I can't probably have to go back to Jordan Rogers, I'm guessing, to get anybody that's close to the apex at Vanderbilt that Pavia has this season. That number surprises me. I think it's weird. I don't think he had an apex nearly this good last season against lesser opponents. And it's not like he went to a roster that's really stacked at Vanderbilt compared to the rest of the team. This might be one of those kind of ghost coaches where Jerry Kill's a little more active than just an offensive analyst on this team, because the offense is completely turned around with Pavia. The defense has really struggled. I remember in the preseason, I was really just frustrated how Clark Lee had made zero progress with the defense since he came in, and they've improved by about, I think, 10 points from the last two seasons combined, just in a defensive power rating alone. So big steps forward. I think that loss at Georgia State set a lot of people off their scent, if you will. Plus Virginia Tech, that win not aging, it doesn't look bad, but it doesn't look as awesome as it did in that first week, considering how much hype Virginia Tech had in some circles coming into the season. So I'm not going to consider the quarterback battle even, but it's not as stark as we think here. And I don't this explosivity for Vanderbilt, considering the style of play that basically Kalen DeBoer plays with, just all right, have Milrow throw it as far as he can downfield and see if something fun happens. For Vanderbilt to be within shouting distance of that is interesting. Is You would probably know this, Doug. Eli Stowers, was he a transfer from somewhere else? Um, I vaguely know that name.
I'm going to check.
I want to say, did he play at Notre Dame?
Yeah, he was there with Hill and crew
New
at New
Mexico
Mexico
State.
State. Now I remember that.
There you
Yes.
go. He followed the kill machine.
He was a backup quarterback and played some receiver for them.
Okay. So you've got some. That's okay. That's how I remember that name then. So top 100 receiver by my metric there. The defense is not the same here between these two, but Vanderbilt's within shouting distance of reasonable. To your point, I've got this as a 12-point game, which is probably about where you've got it from the sounds of it. And surprisingly, my model has this almost basically on the total number. I'm projecting 56, and the total of the market is 55 and a half. So I'm with you here. Not playing this because I have so many dual model plays early in the season. I'm not really searching for action at this point. I'll put it if I had this kind of line a month from now when the number of dual model plays shrinks, I would definitely play this. But then Robert comes in, just he poops in the punch bowl with his 47-8 prediction here. So explain that, buddy.
Yeah, I did look at this now. So I will say that sometimes my model just breaks, if that makes sense. We have what happens is basically, and you can see it here in the chart. We have Alabama with the GGAB there of 161, and then Vanderbilt with the defensive GGAB there of 102. And what happens is when you have a really good rushing team against a team that has a really bad rushing defense, the model in some ways just breaks. It basically just says, okay, they're just going to keep running the ball, and it just gets progressively worse and worse and worse. And the thing is, like looking at my, if you quickly look at the stats I have for the game, I have Milrow with 200 yards rushing, and then another guy with 100 yards rushing. So I don't think that's likely, right? I have Miller with 160 passing yards. That's unlikely. He's probably going to pass more than that. So I think what happens is, again, it's this kind of thing where the model breaks, and I'm looking at why it does that. But I think that maybe the model might be wrong here. I think that there definitely could be some. I think there's some value on Vanderbilt, right? And we saw this last year with Washington after there was the big win there against Oregon. They were really bad for a couple of weeks, and people might forget that going into the Pac-12 championship game, Washington was a massive favorite. They were a massive underdog. They were 9.5 point underdogs to that Oregon team, and we sat here and we're like, yeah, they should be, right? And I think that is a big issue there, where I think a lot of people might be forgetting how poor that Washington team played after that big win at Oregon, and it's about the same time
Yeah,
in the
one other
season.
interesting point is
And I
that we
think
now
we could be
have
looking
two
at
different
something
data
similar this
points
year.
on Alabama where they let a team hang around and they weren't able to really close it out. When they played South Florida, that was 21-16 with 6 minutes to go. They scored 3 touchdowns after South Florida kind of turned the ball over and really made some late mistakes, but that was a 5 point game late in the fourth. And then the way they let Georgia come back just is a cause for concern that maybe they're not really where they want to be on defense, and that defense leaves a little bit to be desired. I definitely don't think that Pavia will be intimidated by anything that they throw out there, and we've seen him perform really well against SEC teams, specifically Missouri this year, and then last year when he was at New Mexico State. They went to Auburn and won as plus 28. They won straight up. So I think that the competition, obviously, Alabama's a much better team, but this is just a spot where I'm not sold on them completely shutting Vandy's offense out. And I just don't think there's going to be a motivation factor there to blow this team out by more than 4 touchdowns.
Are you seeing the total pretty much right on here? Actually, God, Robert, you come to the same total too. Are you seeing a play on
I
either
would
side of
lean
the
over
total?
just because
Okay.
this is not Saban's Alabama game management. It's not Saban's defense. And so there has been some susceptibility to give up yards and points. And I definitely think that Alabama will end up at 35 to 38. So yeah, you look at 35-17 or 35-21 type game to get over the 55 and a half. I would lean over just based on that, but certainly my play would be to take Auburn against the or excuse me, to take Vanderbilt against the number.
Okay. All right. The next one here, Hawaii at San Diego State. Aztecs giving 2.5. San Diego State's a tough read for me. I have a read on Hawaii. I'm not too impressed by them. I'm curious, Duck, why you chose
Yeah,
this one,
so
because
just
this
going
is
back
a
to our
this
Mountain
is
West
a
preview
grab
when
bag
we
for
were
me.
discussing the teams, and I took a regular season win total on San Diego State under 5.5. Obviously, with Sean Lewis coming in, they're running the flash fast offense that he ran at Kent State and had success with at Colorado before he was relieved of his play calling duties there. But they just don't clearly have the personnel to run what they want to run on offense. I'm not really convinced. They're using two quarterbacks, Danny O'Neal, and then their backup quarterback Tua Topa Johnson. I'm just not convinced that either one of them are any good. We saw it in the second half against Central Michigan when San Diego State was shut out and couldn't move the football. But also in 3 games against FBS competition, they're averaging 10 points per game, and they had 3 points at the half against A&M Commerce. And so their offense is just not clicking. A couple of things that concern me in this matchup with Hawaii. San Diego State just cannot run the ball, and they're really bad on third down. So San Diego State is 20 for 58 on third down and just 4 of 10 on fourth down. And so with that, Hawaii has excelled on third down defensively, just allowing 21 out of 56 conversions, which is really going to stress the San Diego State offensive line. They're in third down a ton this year, which means that obviously first and second down are not going so well for them. And they allow a ton of havoc, which would be like tackles for loss, sacks, pressures. And Hawaii really is able to get home on D with their underrated front seven, as they've already gotten 8 sacks and they create a ton of pressure. And so with Hawaii, their bad loss was at Sam Houston State, and that's actually aged pretty well. The Bearcats are much better than expected, and so I give them a pass on that. Hawaii is obviously running the run and shoot offense, and so people think about them throwing the ball around and scoring a lot of points, but really hasn't been so, and the pace has been much slower. They huddle and they're not running a lot of plays. And so I see a lower scoring game on both sides. I would take Hawaii on the money line in this particular situation. But my play on the game is San Diego State's team total under 25 and a half. They have not eclipsed that team total in any of their games against FBS competition to this point. They're going to be in third down a ton. They're not going to be able to convert. And I just don't foresee that the Aztecs are going to string a lot of drives together against an underrated Hawaii front seven. And so in this game, I trust the Hawaii defense going up against the SDSU offense much more than anything in this matchup. And so San Diego State will score under 25 and a half in this game. That's my play on this particular matchup.
That is a good case, and I'll get to the metrics on this one here. First of
I can
all,
spend the money.
brilliant call on going under 5.5 there. You're more than halfway there. Yeah, I remember the Mountain West was confusing to me, and at one point I was thinking maybe can Sean Lewis do it here, but just the pieces just it was hard to piece it together. And then I think what's interesting, the names that you said at quarterback didn't include AJ Duffy, who Phil still had as a starter. Now I don't know if he's been hurt or just he is not up to it, but clearly things are not going the way that that best case come in here. And also to your point, geez, they scored 21 against Central Michigan, who is coming into the season. I had huge concerns, and you did too.
Which they
We both had the Keon Jenkins checkpoint game for Florida International. And yeah, he passed that. Central Michigan is every bit as bad this year as they were last year on pass defense, as expected. But man, Hawaii, just this apex is just brutal. and they don't even try to run the ball. So I'm okay with that low G gab here. Not really explosive in the passing game. This is average, and you're barely above a team that's struggling to throw the ball. Now I think that they do throw. I think that they do throw, and I see this a little bit in the San Jose State numbers. They'll do more short stuff too, which kind of skews your passing efficiency. Okay, to your point, and like I said, the reason I like them, why I come into the season, was their defense had improved, and now they're actually a legitimate back seven here. Maybe some issues in the front four, but we'll see. The picture that you paint, I think, is pretty clear here about just, I look at this, I see, and add it to what you said, I see a lot of punts. I don't see a lot of end zone action in this one. Now, I can't go with the total because if I have one contribution to college football betting, it is only play an over if you're betting on an elite unit. Basically, you want an elite defense if you're playing an under, or an elite offense if you're playing an over. I'm not going to bet on just a crappy unit continuing to be crap, because maybe they're crappy because they're poorly coached and sometimes they can just get it together. But I've got this going, just raw numbers, I've got this going a touchdown under. Now weirdly, the 28 is going to the team total here, but I can make a case against that real quick. So I'm not playing it, but I definitely like your play. I think Robert's just trying to be difficult here by saying under 25. I got two 25s for you. So again, Robert, explain that.
I get there's like your Thanos line perfectly balances all things that should be there. It's yeah. The thing is that the under 25.5 is not a bad play there. My model, although it's more in line with totals this year, I still think it's a tad over comparative to some of Buck's totals. So yeah, I don't hate the under 25. I think there might be some value in this game. I don't see any value in the spread, but I think team total under 25 is 25. I think it's 25.5. So I've got that exactly right there. I think, and again, to be fair, 25 is a very weird number. I don't think it's I think it's very uncommon for teams to score 25 points exactly. 25 as a line and as my model suggests, it's probabilistic, right? So it's there's pieces to that where it's okay, you're looking at like it's 3 touchdowns is 21, and then it's okay, then they might get a field goal and maybe another field goal, or they get a third of a touchdown. There's probabilities like that's how you get to the 25 number, but I
Yeah,
kind of
the
don't mind
Aztecs
the
are
over
two of
25 number
five
because I think
kicking
it's
field goals
probably
this
likely they
year,
just go a little under.
and they're really electing not to even do that
Yeah,
anymore, and that's why their fourth down percentage is lower. They've been in stressful fourth down situations in the red zone, and they're electing to go for it and even forgo the field goal unit. So even field goals will be out here.
I what's interesting to me is and this is where we get the difference between just descriptives and predictives. I see Hawaii's defensive descriptives better, but predictively, San Diego State has a better defense. I'll put it this way: just I love my predictive measures here, but when I see this and just what my brain tells me is, I don't know. This looks like it could go well under, because this 28 looks inflated to me for San Diego State.
Yeah, I
You
have
played this
submitted
one
a wager
already,
on under 25.5.
Duck? Okay, cool. All right, next one here. Boy, I this one didn't pop up as a play, and I'm curious why. So I I can't imagine you're gonna try to outsmart all the
Plug your
sharps
nose
here.
because we're going to be down in the
What's your
dumpsters
play on
searching
Sam
for a
Houston giving
value
10
play
at
here.
UTEP?
So UTEP obviously brought Scotty Walden in from Austin P. He brought a lot of his guys with him from Austin P. One of those guys was backup quarterback Locklear, who he promoted not on the merits, but based on the fact that Locklear was his guy.
Okay. All right. Sam Houston giving 10 at UTEP. Sam Houston sharps seem to be onto them. As much as I love to make fun of them last year, they seem to have. I even noted in this week's other things that we noted for future reference that Sam Houston has improved quite a bit. And I just jokingly said, hey, Keaton Shoemaker was the entire problem. So this line looks a little bit short to me. Duck, are you not worried about that and just think we're ahead of the market
Well, the
here
perception
in
on
terms
Sam
of
Houston
Sam
has certainly
Houston, I'd say,
accurately
research
reflected their play this
ascendancy?
season. We all thought that they were going to be much better than projected when the season started, and they have been. But I think this line has gone too far. So Sam Houston obviously is off of a massive win facing Texas State, who got all the hype in Texas for being one of the premier Group of Five teams, and Sam Houston knocked them off on a last-second field goal. And then you've got 0-4 UTEP, who's played terrible. But a couple things I like in this game. So UTEP obviously brought in Scotty Walden from Austin P, and he brought a lot of Austin P transfers. One of those transfers was backup quarterback Locklear, who was his guy. He was promoted to the number one quarterback, not necessarily on the merits, but based on the fact that he was his guy, right? And so when you look at UTEP, their offensive performance has been poor because they've had a backup FCS quarterback playing against FBS competition all season. But outside of quarterback play, the last couple of weeks, UTEP has actually played okay. They gave Liberty a game. It was 14-10 halfway through the third quarter, and Liberty did punch a couple in to make it a little bit more margin. UTEP covered the number there. And then at Colorado State last week is really where it started to turn, right? They had enough of Locklear. They were getting blown out 24-3. And then they insert incumbent quarterback Cade McConnell, who was there last year, and he immediately led the offense on 2 long scoring drives to get them back in the game. And they actually had the ball in the red zone with a chance to tie, couldn't punch it in. But they played much more spirited football with Cade McConnell at quarterback, and now they're off of a bye week, and they're at home in a primetime situation, a standalone game tomorrow night. And there's big news, obviously, that they just joined the Mountain West Conference, so that provided a little extra momentum for the fan base. But I like the spot for UTEP off of a bye. They're making the change at quarterback, and I fully expect the UTEP offense to look like what we thought they were going to implement and roll out there, with faster tempo, more explosive plays. They're going to have a much better composed quarterback who knows really how to see the field and how to manage playing against FBS competition, which they just clearly did not have in Locklear. So I expect a much more improved offensive effort from Sam Houston, or from UTEP against Sam Houston State. And then Sam Houston State is sky high off of this spot, coming off the win against Texas State in an NFL stadium. Everyone's patting them on the back. That game happened just 5 short days ago, and now they've got to travel to El Paso. It's a long road trip, even though it's in the state of Texas. But this is one of those spots where Sam Houston might be getting just a little too much respect. And I went back and looked at the game last year as well, which was back and forth. It was at Sam Houston State. It was a real close matchup that Sam Houston was actually favored in, and UTEP won the game on the field. And so I'm not sure now, after all that we know about these two teams, that they should be giving a couple of scores here. I took UTEP plus 11 earlier in the week, and I would still play this at plus 10.5. I'm on the Miners tomorrow night.
My goodness. All right. First of all, did not know that they had finally made that switch to Cade McConnell. It was somebody with basically what I call a conversation piece bet on UTEP over, I think it was 4.5 wins. The starting of Locklear puzzled me and then quickly angered me. He's been on the bum list, our bottom 10 quarterbacks here, for quite a few weeks now. Just to your point, I didn't know he wasn't even the starter at Austin P. That's just insane. Not a good decision, but whatever. I make mistakes every day. So let me pull up the metrics on this one here. I guess to your point, we could probably toss this Apex out for UTEP here. Sam Houston is the 66 Apex for Sam Houston is actually a lot better than last year. Now here's where you're seeing, a good running game. I did not see them play either Texas State nor against Hawaii. But this is an impressive number here, especially going against this opponent right here, who seems to be in UTEP vulnerable against the run and the pass too, although the pass shouldn't really hurt them. What else sticks out to me here is you've got, this just speaks this GGAB offense versus defense. I've just got, when I look at this is so far below this, the offense versus the defense. That's a team that's not very physical, and I've got some element of that with Sam Houston. Now, how am I going to quantify that? I don't know. But just if I'm looking at what kind of game to play or to expect, my metrics have Sam Houston actually, only by 9 here. So even that's basically, we should see a huge upgrade here. If we see a huge upgrade there, who knows what McConnell's mental state is after being benched behind that atrocity at quarterback. That would concern me too. That's a gutsy play. So you're actually saying that the Sharps or I would say the Sharps, that the wise guys, let's call them, are a little bit out.
I think so, and I think another interesting thing, I'll just make mention of it real quickly, is it's really hard to ascertain the Sharp action. especially during a normal week, because you have so many people that have entered the market as new wagers given the legalization. And now you have sharp players that are releasing their action later on in the week. And so, really hard to say. But this game that's taking place tomorrow, the line came down and actually has touched 9.5 in a couple of places. And so, I think maybe some of the sharp action is actually on UTEP. Now, the quarterback play, I cannot overstate this, is going to be vastly different between McConnell and Locklear. McConnell, again, in their last game against Colorado State, in about a quarter and a half, threw for 220 yards and 2 touchdowns. They're going to move the football. It's going to really be a determining factor on if they can convert on third down and stay on the field, and how the run defense is going to be shored up, because Sam Houston has a very strong running game, and that's usually something that travels well. So I'm not going to necessarily call for UTEP to win the game as they did last year, but golly, man, their offense and the offensive metrics are quite poor. It starts and ends with who they had throwing the ball around, and the guy just could not make decisions and could not hit the open receiver, and took way too many sacks. It was brutal, and I think you'll just see a much different performance with UTEP off of a bye to get some of those things ironed out with the guy who should have been the starter all along.
Yeah, very fair. Robert, you've got this actually a 2-point game. We both have this well under the total of 50.5. Now, again, with something resembling a competent quarterback here in for Mr. Locklear, that could actually change in a second. But boy, I don't know. I need a UTEP win here since I'm behind the 8 ball in terms of my season win total. You think that might happen if you're looking at just 2 points? Actually, let's look at who your quarterback was.
Cade
You
McConnell,
know,
I checked.
I'll, it is. Okay. Then that's in there, and that explains the difference between yours and mine. What do you think here?
Yeah, I UTEP here. I think there is a bit of it. Obviously, Sam Houston came off a big win last week against a rival. I didn't quite realize that Texas State and Sam Houston State are actual rivals. So there is like that angle to it of the like coming off emotional win. The flip side of that too is the fact that this is a non-zero road trip here, right? Yes, these are both in the state of Texas, but very opposite sides of the state of Texas, right? UTEP barely in Texas, barely qualifies as Texas, functionally New Mexico. Sam Houston is somewhere around Houston, right? So that's the other side of Texas. Very long to get there. Yeah, I can legitimately see this being there is a bit of that hangover. And again, that was just on Saturday that they won that game. That was earlier on Saturday. But this is the thing. I would not be surprised if UTEP makes a game of this, especially with a better quarterback. And that's my model. Remember, it models whichever quarterback played the most snaps last week. That was Cade McConnell last week, so Cade McConnell's in there. And I actually think it's some of Cade McConnell last season in there too, because I think it looks at this season and last season's passing stats, and whichever one it has there's a cutoff, but if a quarterback is under a certain number of passing snaps this year, it uses his data from last year. So there's that angle to it. What I will say is interesting that we both have UTEP at 17 points. We both have them at 17, but I have Sam Houston at 19. You have them at 26, which is I think the interesting discrepancy. But the difference is that when you look at some of these games, the difference between getting having your opponent score 26 and you and scoring 19, that's exactly a touchdown. But if you're able to extend the drives, maybe that doesn't show up necessarily in the point totals, but it does show up in bleeding out clock and stopping your opponent from having more time to score, right? I think that's also a huge part of this as well.
To your
Yeah,
point, too,
I
on
actually
a
kind of like
lower
UTEP here.
scoring Sam Houston output, Sam Houston quarterback Watson has been sacked 12 times this year, and he's thrown 5 INTs, and they have allowed some negative plays as well. So it's not it's not fair to expect that they're just going to roll in there and run the ball and have no sort of chaos allowed and not have any problems against the UTEP defense. 12 sacks, it's a pretty high number, and 5 INTs and some negative running plays. And so Sam Houston, while they are vastly improved on offense based on what we saw last year with their anemic offense that was just not prepared, they do still have some problems that they need to shore up. So yeah, this is one of those. This is just one of those games where you might look at the score and see that they beat Texas State. Which, by the way, against Texas State, they were down 29-7 in that game. So it was not as though they just controlled that game. They had to come back, and they were actually down late in the second half. Let me just pull it real quick. It was a real shocker that they came back. With 4 minutes to go in the third quarter, they were down 39-21. So they were getting blown out. And so if that result holds, what is the line? If they get blown out by Texas State, what is the line? 8, 7? So, yeah, they came back and won. They played a good quarter and a half of football, but I think this is much closer than this line indicates.
All right. The other thing, I was just looking at UTEP's schedule here. This is interesting. When their final, after this, Sam Houston has one loss. UTEP's final 6 games, they have Tennessee, who is undefeated and probably, I think, one of the best teams. The other 5 opponents have combined total 5 wins. So this might be like the kickoff to that stretch. Maybe he just lets Locklear start against Tennessee just to keep the really valuable one healthy. So interesting. I think this will tell me if
don't
there's
throw
any
the
life
ticket
in my
away
Utah,
because they
my
still
UTEP,
have a home
play
game
of
against
4.5.
Florida
I'll say
International,
that for sure.
a coin flip game at Louisiana Tech. They host a really bad Middle Tennessee. They host our favorite regular season win total play, Kennesaw under 2.5. And then they play rivalry game New Mexico State against a New Mexico State
No.
team that is way, way down. Frankly, not only is 4.5 still in play, I'm not going to call for it, but if they were to win
Yeah.
this game or maybe catch Western Kentucky, they get on a roll, maybe they sniff 5 or 6 wins.
Yeah. Would be nice if McConnell played defense, though. I'll just say that. Some problems here. The last one here, you're throwing me some head fakes on these because when I look at some of these lines, they seem a little obvious, but then maybe not so obvious. I'll just give you what the headline on this is. Oh, Boise State's giving 26.5. They should cover that by halftime because Ashton Jeanty is going to have 200 yards by the end of the second quarter.
I did lay it with Boise.
You're not making
a
a play that's just that blatant and obvious, are you?
Where they've gotten the real last tough hurdle to play UNLV, but they had a big game last week against Washington State, and they cleared that hurdle pretty easily. Utah State is really a train wreck. So Boise State is certainly head and shoulders a much better football team. Utah State defense, I just don't see how they're going to get stops. They played some spirited football in the rivalry game against Utah, but they were destroyed by USC. And then last week against Temple, they get up 14-0 and they lay down against the Owls and lose by 16. And there's a lot to draw from that when you have Temple go 31-8 the rest of the way after you're up by a couple of scores late in the second quarter. It's of real concern to suspect that Utah State is going to have any resistance against the Boise State offense. And Boise State has been in this position before where they've been laying a big number middle of the season at home at night, and they cover these games more often than not. And it's not a train that I want to step in front of. It might be the square play, but with how bad Utah State's defense is, and they have very little to draw from on offense, I just can't see a situation where Utah State. Let me just put it this way. Here's the situation I can see. I can see this game 49-10 in the late stages of the third quarter, and Utah State has already substituted their second team offense to work on things, and you need 2 scores to get back within the number. How is that going to happen? I can't see it happening. I see Boise State putting up a massive number here. There will be some times this season where I think it's be okay to fade Boise State. One of those could be next week when they go to the island in a super late game at Hawaii if they're laying a big enough number. But the time to fade Boise is not against this Swiss cheese defense that will just have no answers for the Boise State rushing attack and then subsequent play action off of that with crossing routes with their tight ends and their big physical receivers.
You make a good point, and as I pull up my metrics here on this, one of the angles that we thrive on here in the fringes of the sport is trying to get ahead of the market about who really secretly really stinks. It's not just like a bad team, and I think Utah State could be, and this might be masked by the whole murk that is a lot of the Mountain West Conference. Utah State is exceptionally bad. I just see right here just these 2 defensive metrics right here that stands out to me. They cannot stop the pass, but then they really cannot stop the run. That's where the conventional wisdom maybe is selling short just what the actuals might be at the half. He might have 250 yards at the half. GT might. I can tell you, as somebody who's on Boise over 9.5 wins, I've got concerns about 2 things. This pass defense it's troublesome, and not in a good way. It's troublesome for Boise backers. Now, this miserable passing offense, is Bryson Barnes still starting, or have they broken the glass and gone to Spencer Petras yet? which is
I'm going to pull
true
it up real quick.
desperation.
Spencer Petras played the entire
Do
game
we know
against
that?
Temple.
Okay. Just, I don't know. The jokes write themselves sometimes, as they say, right? He's not going to exploit this, but this is one of my concerns as a Boise backer for the season. The quarterback play also quietly has stunk. I think if you're running so well as Boise is, I can't see how you can be that inefficient in the passing game. The 78 Apex, when you clearly have the most talent, except for maybe UNLV, now that Odom's got more of like his portal guys in, that's a concern. But again, I don't think it's a problem this game. You've got a horrible defense, just horrible all around defense. Even just how bad is it? Even against this Boise offense or defense with some problems, neither Robert or I have them breaking 20, and I think Boise can get to. I think Boise gets to 50 without breaking a sweat, unless they basically just decided to end this one early. Not going to play this one. I wanted to push back a little bit, but then you dropped Spencer Petras in front of me, and I just ran away from that real quick.
Yeah. With Boise State, it's interesting because obviously Boise State's going to be a very public team with Gene T there as the running back. A lot of people are going to be betting on that, right? Obviously, the sports books add a bit of an extra tax on that. They inflate that line a little bit. I'm happy that my model has basically exactly that line. I think Buck has a little extra. I think that's a 31. I have 26, so very similar in that case. But I feel if basically the running back wasn't a Heisman favorite, this line would be like 21, and then that's when my model would still say 26, right? I like that in there, that I do have that, but this is a little too long for me to have a play. Could they cover this? 100% yes, but I'm just a bit too long for me. I think there's just a little too much hype on Boise State right now, especially coming off that big kind of win there against Washington State in functionally prime time, Western prime time, as it were.
Yeah, one other thing is I'm looking at this. I remember we talked about Jalen Royals in the Mountain West preview. He's got to be a rough spot for him, not really catching passes from the pig farmer and now having Spencer Petras at quarterback. That's a tough spot for him. All right, one more. Miami of Ohio at Toledo. Toledo giving 7. We had this as a dual model play. Gabbert has just not thrown the ball nearly as well as expected. Now, remind me, who was Miami played in non-conference? They played Northwestern, right? And they played Cincinnati. I think they play that every year. Does that sound right? Seems like they played
Yep.
those two guys almost every year.
And then at Notre Dame, and they played UMass last week on homecoming.
Okay. Yeah, they handled UMass okay, if I remember correctly.
No, they needed a last-second field goal to
Okay.
tie it, and then they won it late by 3
That is concerning.
in over.
Toledo, maybe they're getting a little bit of excess credit for that embarrassing Mississippi State in Starkville, but this seems to be one of actually, I don't know. Seems like every year I try to poo Toledo and they just shove it in my face. This year, I believe. Not familiar with the quarterback, but he's every bit as good as a passer, if not better, than what DeQuan Finn did for them last year. From a defensive standpoint, pretty good against the pass, really good against the run. Makes me just like this as a physical team. This is a dual model play, and I would caution you, sir, go against dual model plays at your own peril. Are you going to do so here?
I certainly hope the dual model play would have been on the other side of 7, because 6.5 has been widely available for some time, and the line is now 6. But I took 7.5 with Miami of
Wow.
Ohio. Similar to what we talked about in the MAC preview, the mindset with Chuck Martin and Miami of Ohio has widely been to disregard the non-conference. We've seen them play poorly in the non-conference, and then they really ratcheted up during MAC play. And exactly what we thought would play out, where they played a Big Ten foe. They played Cincinnati in a game where they hadn't really performed well over the last 10 years. They won the game last year, so Cincinnati had a little extra payback in that one. They actually competed pretty well with Notre Dame for a half, 14-3, before Notre Dame punched in a couple scores to extend margin there. And then say what you will about the UMass game. UMass competed pretty well against Miami. It was homecoming for Miami, so maybe they were distracted. But you know what? UMass played okay against Toledo as well. UMass outgained Toledo by 130 yards in the game. So UMass actually competed okay against Toledo in their matchup with Toledo as well. So it's not really a data point that I am going to use with the common opponent and say, oh man, Toledo's a much better football team. I'm just not there yet. So a couple of things, right? We talked about Miami of Ohio and how they treat the non-conference, and we also talked about if you like them to win the MAC, buy them now rather than preseason because you're getting much better odds at plus 700 or plus 800 right now. But anyway, Toledo, they're getting so much respect here. Why? They blasted Mississippi State, but they're not playing Mississippi State this week, right? This is such an important game for both teams. They typically bring their A game. Last year in the game, Miami was in firm control until quarterback went out with injury, and then Toledo ended up winning it late. But I'm not sold that Toledo is that much better than Miami of Ohio. And you just see a different team show up in MAC play with Miami year in and year out, where they always come into MAC play 1-3, and then they just start to get rolling. And is Miami live in this game? Also, as long as Jason Candle is coaching on the sidelines at Toledo, Miami is live in this game because Toledo is also notorious for every year they just throw up a really bad stinker where they're in a game as a 3 touchdown favorite or a big favorite and they're down, and it's really bizarre, the up and down performances. We really haven't seen a lot of that from Toledo this year yet, so they're probably due to have a little bit of regression back to their mean. I think Miami's going to compete here okay.
All right. I've got questions for you after this, but I'll let Robert chime in first. Robert, there's no way you're going to buy that, is there?
No, generally by I'm not the biggest fan of they only care about conference games, they care less about other games. That kind of makes some sense, but again, our models are pretty clear on this one, right? I don't know. I do I like Toledo here. I thought like when I saw this line before my model, I was like, oh, probably gonna Miami of Ohio here because again, Miami, Ohio has been pretty good, and I was like, oh, Toledo, they lost to Quan Finn, but my model really likes Toledo here, and Bucks likes it as well. So, yeah, I'm going with Toledo. I think maybe the model sees something here, and when my model sees something that Bucks model sees, I like that. Could we be wrong? Yeah, we can always be wrong. The dual model plays are not infallible. We did lose some last week, but that it happens, right? There were times we're wrong, but yeah, I think there's a chance that we could have we may have my model seems to have found something here, so I'm going with my model on that one.
So, I guess a couple. I don't know how to frame this, so I'll just start with this. Going into the season, I thought Gabbert was the best quarterback in the MAC. Let me pull up this game because maybe this can inform this discussion or my position a little better here. I want to see what he did against. Okay. Yeah, he had a good game against Cincinnati. That would be concerning. 9.7 yards per attempt, one interception. They only scored 16 points, though, which is a bit of a concern. Um, I'm just wondering. It's if I look at the numbers so if I throw out last season here, I cannot tell what their offensive identity is. This is what concerns me. Now, again, good data point against Cincinnati, but Cincinnati's defense is pretty bad. It's not often that I get overplays, maybe one or two a week at most, and they came in because they have a good offense and a really rough defense. What do you think, like Miami, they're going to play better? Do you think they're going to be much better in the passing game or the run game? Just I can't discern. I can't get data points together to see where there's hope for Miami of Ohio.
Yeah, we'll have to really see how good Toledo is. They give up a ton of yards through the air. They gave up 319 to Mississippi State, gave up 300 yards against Western Kentucky. UMass, goodness, UMass was 26 out of 40 for 259, and UMass outgained them by 130 yards in the game. There is some conclusion to be drawn that the Toledo defense is not overly exceptional now. Miami is lost at an identity, right? We're certainly seeing that they really miss Larvaday and the receiver who transferred to South Carolina. There's a little bit of that where they have played sporadic, I guess is the best word to use on offense. They've struggled to run the ball too. So definitely some concerns. I'm not necessarily saying that Miami is absolutely my favorite play of the week, but I think the line was not giving the Red Hawks nearly enough credit for what they're going to bring. I think they'll just have enough to compete and make the game close. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how good is Toledo, right? They had numerous chances against Western Kentucky to win the game. They couldn't do it. I know they beat Mississippi State handily, but they've been up and down defensively. So I don't know. I want to see more. I want to see Toledo do it this week, and then maybe I'll get on board with the Rockets.
Yeah, and believe me, it's never my intention to ever talk anybody onto Toledo in any circumstance. I guess I was looking at my top receivers here. So Cade McDonald, apex of 184. Let me see where that ranks him. He's basically, it seems like, Miami's best receiver. So that ranks him almost top 40. So maybe that I'm just, I guess you brought up the point. I forgot about this because he was just a comet across the sky last year. Was that Lavardian, whatever his name was? Because he was just a 1 year transfer, right? He came from FCS before in 22 was in
Yeah.
FCS, right? But I don't know. Boy, that's a rough apex though. So yeah, we'll see. Boy, taking on the dual
Defense,
model play.
actually, Miami defense has not played that bad either, though. I mean, if you look at the competition they've played and what type of yards and point totals they're posting, some of the negative plays they've created, their defense took a little bit of a step back, but Miami hangs their hat on defense, special teams, low scoring games. I think that's what we're going to see here.
Yeah, that's interesting. So okay, let's go through this again. You've got Cincinnati, who is actually a very good passing team. They've Notre Dame. Geez, I don't even know what to make of them. I don't know if they're, but they change by the hour. It seems like Riley Leonard is good or really bad or okay, and he can run or he can't run. I don't know. Um, but the defensive apex, and that's interesting. Considering you've played one really good passing team in Cincinnati, yeah, that's interesting. But Toledo really played a running team. This is interesting too because I know they played Mississippi State, who basically doesn't run the ball at all. Western Kentucky doesn't run that much either.
No, they don't.
Massachusetts doesn't run well. We know that. And who else have they played?
Duquesne.
Jeez. Okay, that doesn't even go in my stats here. I don't think I have FCS games. Yeah, maybe there's a little bit of fluff in there, but I don't know. I feel like I'm arm wrestling with you on this one. Just I'm married to the dual model plays.
Definitely the nature of the segment, right? And I listened to the
Yeah.
show earlier in the week, and I was writing down my notes and going through all of the things that I had for the slate, and I really had a hard time disagreeing with. You go down the line: Texas State, Northern Illinois, Navy, Bowling Green, Louisiana, Tennessee under, San Jose State, UCF, Florida over. I could see Arizona State, and the list goes on and on. All the games that you covered, I either had some very similar plays on my card that I've already locked in, or they were games that I leaned that way. I didn't have a lot that I disagreed on, but I did make a play on Miami plus 7.5 earlier in the week. And so it was really the one spot where I really disagreed. And it's just one of those things, too, where, I can see a case when you're looking at Toledo if you're going to lay 6. I certainly wouldn't lay 7 or 7.5, but sometimes what this comes down to is you bet numbers and not teams. And when the number calls for a play on either side, sometimes you take the hook, right? And Toledo still may cover the number. Miami might win the game outright. I really don't know. But in this game, with what I know about both these teams and how we predicted that the non-conference for Miami would play out, it was very tempting for me. And I actually ultimately did take a 7.5 just for -6 with Toledo, if that was the side that you were going to take, but certainly wouldn't lay 7 or 7.5.
So two things just in response, and then we'll wrap it up. Agree with you on bet the number, not the team. Who really resents that after a while is people bet on Jason Candle. We'll just say that. And then what's interesting too is it seems, I'm curious if you're seeing the same thing here. I'm seeing a lot more convergence around a lot of the sharp plays early this season than in prior years. It seems when I reach out to different people, a lot of them are on the same games week after week. Are you seeing that more than in prior seasons, or is that just specific to me?
I'd say that I haven't seen a lot of corroboration with people being on the same side of a lot of games. I think that one thing that you're seeing a lot of people do is they're trying to find an edge and they're trying to become sharper. And so maybe they're building out their own models, or they're establishing a power rating system, or trying to get ahead of bad lines earlier in the week, anticipating movement. All those things are effective if you do it properly. Because again, if you make 10 bets and you have positive closing line value and positive EV positions, over 10 bets, it may not matter, but over 1,000 wagers, it will matter. And so there could be some smarter positioning within the wagers. And honestly, as people continue to do this for a longer period of time, you just build your data points mentally about what you're looking for week to week. One thing that I have routinely done while staying up till the wee hours of the morning on the East Coast while watching the late games wrap up is we see FanDuel and some of the other legal books that are opening up the next week's lines at 2:30 in the morning. And
Mm.
so I'm up anyway watching the late games wrap up, and so I've got the pencil to the paper and I'm getting the work done to try and find value in the openers, even though it's the middle of the night. And so you have to be in a spot where if you're really trying to be profitable at this and not have it be just something else to do, sometimes that's what it takes too, is being willing to uh, have a model, have a number, and be ready to hit the submit button when the openers come out. So there could be some of that too, where the number gets shaped based on people trying to
Yeah.
get out ahead of line moves or inaccurate openers.
I would just say this without giving too much away. I would kill to be able to bet an actual opener. I'll just say that I've left a lot of money's been left on the table with my inability to do so. With that, Duck, thank you so much. We will do this again soon. Appreciate it, and good stuff. We agree on some, but not everything, which is pretty much ideal. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for watching. Good luck this weekend, and we will talk to you next week.
Yep. Have a great week, guys. We'll see you at the window.